I'm Tania Israel, author of Beyond Your Bubble: How to Connect Across the Political Divide, Skills and Strategies for Conversations at Work. I am here with Nancy, who has generously agreed to share her experiences with me. And so, thank you so much, Nancy, for your willingness to have this conversation.
Thank you for all of your work around this important subject.
Oh, thanks. So we know each other, but maybe you can start by just sharing a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, maybe where you live now, what you invest your time and energy in, work, family, community, whatever those things are for you.
Sure. So, yeah, my name is Nancy. I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, um, and I left at age 17 and lived all over the Midwest until about 6 years ago. I moved to California. So, I am a lawyer who gave up practicing and litigating to become a full time professor. So, I am a teacher these days, and that's made me more um, almost less career focused than I used to be, even though I'm still, ambitious in the sense I want to get tenure and I really want to, be the best teacher I can be and do right by my students. I'm focusing a lot more on my personal life and building community and other experiences in life beyond just my career lately. So that's actually been kind of refreshing and giving myself permission not to necessarily be a super, high achieving workaholic
Yeah.
anymore. So that's kind of why
Oh,
I'm in my
great.
space.
And you've lived in a bunch of different parts of the country, as have I. And so I'm curious about how you would describe your politics and maybe what are some of the significant influences on your political views.
So, like I said, I grew up in Memphis, and Memphis was a pretty conservative city to grow up in. And I think that living there absolutely started shaping my political views from a young age. My parents were both Democrats, but there was so much racism that was undeniable living in Memphis, and I was so bothered by it. Um, so, one of my first political experiences was actually serving as a congressional page when I was a junior high school. And I got appointed partly because of a magazine. Memphis Magazine was holding a contest for people who were born after Martin Luther King was shot, to talk about our experiences with racism. And I talked about my experience as a white girl with a black best friend and how weird that was because our lunchroom was segregated and other experiences like that, and really expressing kind of a Pollyanna pie in the sky hope for maybe this is the last generation that'll be like that. Of course it isn't. Um, but that got me. I think that was largely what got me an appointment to be a congressional page, by Harold Ford Jr., who is an African American congressman in Memphis. And I think he really liked the article. So I get to DC to be a page, and he's a Democrat. I assume I'm going to be a Democrat page. But I get there, they no, we're short on Republican pages. Do you mind working with the Republican Congress people while you're there? And I said, sure. And that was my first experience really learning how to move beyond the partisan bubble. And I became really good friends with the other Republican pages. And I loved working for the Republican Congress, even though I was very liberal. I was awarded the most Democratic page award at the end of the year. So I didn't like give up any of my political beliefs, but I opened up to really becoming very close to people who had very different views. So that absolutely helped, inform my
Wow.
experience. Yeah.
That is quite an experience, quite a foundation that you had there, like early on in
Yeah.
doing that. And yeah, so thanks.
Yeah, I feel
That's
very
great.
fortunate. But I mean, I am very liberal. I'm very, Democrat, progressive, and a lot of that is because I have felt the impact of the law on my life. So I know it's not just a theoretical debate. I mean, the laws really do affect our lives. So I almost was not able to have a safe and legal abortion when I was a teenager. I was 17, and Tennessee had a parental consent law with no judicial bypass, no exceptions, and I was trying to figure out how to get to a different state, maybe how to self-abort. I was considering suicide. I mean, I know the dire stakes at play when you deny women and girls access to safe and legal abortion. And Planned Parenthood, by coincidence, was already challenging that statute around the same time I needed an abortion, and they got an injunction against it just in time for me to have an abortion. So I just felt, well, I know Planned Parenthood saved my life. So, that made me want to go to law school. And that inspired my career as a lawyer. And so also did realizing that I was bisexual in college, and again, realizing that as a bisexual woman, if I wanted to end up with a woman, I was not going to have equal rights, and that meant no economic security, all kinds of repercussions. And so, because of who I am as a queer bisexual woman who's had an abortion at age 17 but almost couldn't, all of these things absolutely inform my political beliefs. And it does make it hard to be patient with people who aren't sympathetic to the reality of what people like me go through and how the laws do affect their lives. But I still do my best to keep my heart open to people who feel very differently about those issues.
Yeah, it sounds like you've had some very significant personal experiences, as well as your professional understanding of the law that have really shaped your views. Um, so, can you maybe talk, but and at the same time, you were talking about this experience you had about, being able to hang out with and be friends with Republican pages and all of this. And so you've got some particular views. And at the same time, it seems like you have, from an early age, been able to stay connected to people who have very different views.
Yes,
Mhm.
that's very important to me.
Yeah. So I know that you had an experience in the last couple of years that was pretty significant in terms of connecting with somebody whose political views and values were different from your own. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I think maybe the most profound experience I've had around that was in 2020, about 6 months into the pandemic. I got a phone call from my stepbrother, who I didn't grow up with, so I didn't have a lot of time with him growing up because he was a good 10 years older than I was, and our parents got married when we were older. So, but I always wanted to be closer to him. So he was on the West Coast in Oregon. I was in California, and the rest of our families were in the Midwest, and we couldn't get to each other physically because of the pandemic. We were all kind of isolated, and I had been living as a hermit, for the first 6 months of the pandemic. I didn't have someone I was living with, so I hadn't touched another human being for months and months. And he called me, and he was very scared and was asking for help because he had cancer, and he was due to have surgery, and he didn't really have a way to get to the hospital, which was in a different town. And he was asking for help, but he wasn't even sure what he was asking for exactly. And I said I would come up there. I would definitely give him a ride to the surgery. He said I might need more help beyond that. And I said, what kind of help? He's like, I can't even tell you. And I said, well, I'll come up and I'll just, we'll just take this day at a time and see, how I can be of the most help. Now, I was a little concerned because even though we used to have political views that were aligned in the past 10, 15 years, he'd become pretty conservative. He'd become a Fox News watching Trump voting conservative Republican. And I was concerned about that. I really was. I was kind of worried that, I need to be there for him, to care for him, to be supportive. But if he turns on Fox News and we start talking politics, it could all fall apart. I was worried. And I did read your book, Tanya, just in time for the script, and it did help me a lot, because I was not going there to try to change his mind about anything political. I was going up there to help my stepmother who was in crisis, and that was all
So,
that mattered.
so can I ask, before that point, had you all had conversations about politics, and how did that go if you had?
No, actually, we'd always avoided it. Now, I had conversations with his brother and other members of my step family who were very conservative, and it had gotten so painful I'd stopped coming to Thanksgiving dinner because of the things that would come out of their mouths that would just horrify me. So I had kind of distanced myself from that part of my step family. But I always really loved Mike, and I wish we had been closer. So it was, I did view it as an opportunity to, have more time with him too. Horrible circumstances, but I was kind of grateful for the opportunity to reconnect with him. But I got up there, and he was um, a lot sicker than either of us really. He wasn't aware how sick he was. He was having trouble getting through to his doctors, and it took a lot of phone calls on my part and a lot of intervention to finally get answers. And the answer was that he was, in fact, not going to have surgery. He's inoperable. I mean, the cancer had spread so much. So it had moved from his throat to his face to his brain. It was starting to attack his brain. And that's one reason why he couldn't even be coherent about what he needed. He couldn't even think straight. He was in so much pain, and it was starting to attack his brain. So it was, I kept Fox News on for him. I didn't even care. I just wanted to do whatever I could to give him comfort. And he was still coherent when I got there. We were still able to have some really good days together. And by good, I don't mean pain free because he was through this whole thing up until the point I got him into hospice, and he got palliative care. Um, but we did talk politics, a few times, and we did it without any kind of real tension or hostility at all. It was really wanting to understand each other. Um, so I was curious about why he voted, what he liked about it. And he explained to me he's an academic. He's a former professor. He's an award-winning documentary filmmaker. So I'm thinking, you're too smart to like Trump. But I didn't say that out loud. That's what I'm thinking. I'm like, how could you? And he's like, I find him really entertaining. And he explained to me how he really thought that Trump was just almost comic relief. And it was just great to have somebody in office who was just so fun to watch and follow. And he found him really engaging and entertaining. And I didn't debate that with him. I just kind of wanted that answer. I got it from him and we moved on. And then at another point, we were talking about, we both had very, very diametrically opposed views of the Breonna Taylor shooting, which had just recently occurred. And we were both really confused as to why we would think so differently about this incident. I'm like, well, it just can't be okay for police to barge into someone's home and start shooting and to shoot and to kill somebody like that. He's like, well, no, it's not okay for police to announce themselves and then have somebody shoot at them. And I'm like, wait, they didn't announce themselves. It was a no knock warrant. We realized that the stories we had been reading had been reporting it. So I really believe they hadn't announced themselves, or that Breonna Taylor and her partner hadn't heard them announce themselves. And he really believed that they had announced themselves and that they heard that and they shot anyway. So we really, once we realized we've been reading really different reporting of the same incident, I think that really opened our eyes to how, we can both be very intelligent, informed, good people and think and view something like that so very differently because of where we're getting our information from.
And people often say to me, like, how can I have a conversation with someone if we can't even agree on the facts? So that when you realized you had different facts at hand, what did you do with that? Did you feel like you needed to try to reconcile those differences or?
No, I think we both felt really relieved to know what the basis of each other, that we actually both had a solid foundation for opinion, which was the information we've been given. I think I was a little annoyed by my news sources for not giving me maybe the full scoop. He was just as annoyed by his news sources. Like, so we were actually almost kind of humbled by it and apologetic for being so set in our views. We hadn't been aware that there were other accounts out there and that we didn't really know what the facts. We really
Yeah.
didn't know.
And maybe it wasn't even that it was contradictory, but that just you were each getting different slices of information, different emphasis on different facts. Is that
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah,
right?
it was actually one of the better conversations I've ever had about politics with someone I didn't agree with. We really
Mhm.
did. We wanted to find out why we disagreed, and we dug until we figured out why. I'm like, okay, that makes sense that we disagree about it. And we moved
Yeah.
on. We moved on. That was that. But it was unfortunately the last chapter of his life, and I did get to spend his last 3 months with him. And even after the brain tumor took over and he wasn't coherent anymore, I still kept Fox News on for him, just in case it made him feel a little better. As much as it cringed every time I heard anything coming out, it was worth it because all that mattered was being there. So it's not that we didn't pretend that the political differences didn't exist, but it didn't translate into hostility or anything negative. It was more about, okay, so we've come together in this really horrible, difficult set of circumstances. Um, but we're reprioritizing what matters, and our political differences don't.
Yeah. And it sounds like you not only had those conversations with him, but you sort of immersed yourself in his context also that,
Mhm,
that was related to politics. I know you were talking about, keeping Fox News on. You've also told me that you had interactions with his friends as well.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, that's right. Because his friends were, 'cause we didn't really talk politics as friends and I, because we could have gone at it because they were healthier. So we could have had really invigorating debates, but we didn't. We didn't. But I knew that they were even more conservative than he was, and they knew how flaming liberal I was. We just simply again put that aside because it just didn't matter.
Yeah. And I'm so sorry for your loss. And it sounds just amazing that you were able to spend that time together, and that became such a priority, that relationship, it was more important than those differences then. Yeah. Mhm. It is that part of why you I mean, it takes some energy, it takes some fortitude to have these conversations and to, like you were saying, you would just be, have the news on and that would make you cringe. Uh, and sometimes people say to me, well, why am I going to put myself through that? And it sounds like you had sort of a particular motivation. Does it make you want to do that in other kinds of circumstances, or
I mean, actually just this morning I had a much less intense version of that happen. But yeah, I really, I mean, I'm dating somebody who I'm absolutely crazy about, and he told me after we've been dating a few weeks that he's actually a Republican, which in Southern California, I just kind of sometimes assume that I'm not, because he's an environmentalist, he's pro-choice, he's pro-LGBT rights. It doesn't even occur to me he could be a Republican, but he is. And so we tease each other a lot. The fact that, um, I think he's secretly a Democrat, but he secretly wants his party to go back to what it used to be. He's what Republicans used to be before the Trump era. Uh,
mhm.
and so we actually do pride ourselves on being in a bipartisan relationship. And so this morning was a really tough morning for me because I fell asleep reading the headlines about the leaked Supreme Court opinion that, reportedly is going to overturn Roe versus Wade. And that's someone I've been dreading for decades and fighting against in my career and in my personal life and my volunteer energy. And I was devastated reading, and yet I still haven't read the draft opinion because I can't bring myself to, because I know I will just be lost in depression or rage or both. I just can't read it yet, but I know it's there. So I woke up really, really upset about knowing about the leaked Supreme Court opinion. And it was about as depressed as he's ever seen me. And he had been planning to introduce me to his dad today for lunch, which is kind of a big thing, right? Um, and he's like, well, maybe you shouldn't meet him today. Maybe you're not feeling it. I'm like, no, no, I still want. He's like, well, my dad is pro-life, so the Supreme Court opinion could come up and that could get bad. And I said, okay, thanks for telling me that, but I still want to meet him, and I promise it'll go okay. And it did. And it's not that the subject didn't come up, but I was very mindful of the fact that I didn't want the conversation to go south. And what was more important to me was connecting with his dad, meeting his dad, and having it be a good thing. And so Ken had stepped away to get some drinks or something, and it was just me and his dad. And his dad has been really excited about meeting me. He knows that I'm, this lawyer who's, done all these things in my career that he thinks is great. So he brings it up. He says, so I would love to know your opinion about the Supreme Court opinion on abortion that just got leaked. And I said, yeah, Ken mentioned you might want to talk about that and bring that up. But you know what? I'm really, really pro-choice. I'm actually really, really devastated. And I really can't go there. I'm really sorry. He's like, it's okay. We don't have to. We changed the subject and it was fine. Um, so that's a more recent example of how in that moment I was more prioritizing building a relationship with this person than trying to convince him how horrible it was and that was not my goal. And so
Yeah.
I was able to just put it aside to have a really good lunch with Ken's dad, and I did.
I'm really hearing that there are some things that you've done that seem to have helped um, seem to have helped things go more smoothly with people who have different views. And one thing that you've done is you've got some real self-awareness about what's going to be challenging, and you've equipped yourself with something. You're like, I'm going to read your book, and so you've prepared yourself, but also you've made different choices with different people and at different times in terms of, you'll still engage with people who have different views, but sometimes you'll talk about politics and sometimes you won't. And it seems like that's really helped you to be able to maintain those connections.
Mhm. Yeah. And then I'm thinking back, even when I've done a lot of time volunteering for abortion rights, and other issues. But I used to volunteer in front of abortion clinics, helping escort women past the protesters and past the sidewalk counselors as they tried to change her mind. And what I used as a strategic tactic became a little more than a strategic tactic. What I used to do is I would simply engage these, sidewalk counselors who try to talk women out of having abortion. I would just engage them out in conversation and friendly conversation and distract them. And I would just really just have friendly discourse and get to know them. And they would actually forget to pay attention to the women because I would distract them so effectively. I mean, I ended up liking these people. We were absolutely enemies in what our goals were in that moment.
Hmm.
But what started off is, strategy and tactics, just need to distract them. I actually ended up really connecting with them as human beings. So,
Yeah.
um, so that was kind of
And I really hear that you're not compromising your values at all. That you have very strong and very liberal values. And when you have these conversations with other people, it's not about, finding a middle ground, or, everybody's got to give up something. But I've heard you say a number of times, I wasn't trying to change their minds. I wasn't trying to convince them. That wasn't the goal. It sounds like really trying to understand, like when you have engaged in these conversations, trying to understand or connect has really been what you've been aiming for.
yeah. And I did. I even understood where the sidewalk counselors were coming from because I appreciate what they're doing. As much as I hate what they're doing, I appreciate the fact that if I really thought that abortion was murder, absolutely I'd be doing the same thing they were.
Hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
I don't think abortion is murder. I don't think that life begins at conception. But if I did, then I applaud them, for fighting for life. That's what they think that they're doing. And I appreciate that on some level. So
Yeah. Well, you're an
yeah.
activist too, so
Yeah.
you can appreciate other activists, even if they're advocating for something very different. So these are great examples of things working really well. Is there is there anything that you found to be kind of bumpy, and how did, like, are there things that haven't gone as you would have hoped?
I mean, I honestly, Tanya, your book really did help a lot because when I walk in with the goal of changing minds, you think as a lawyer that people just want to be rational and if they think rationally, they'll come to the same point. And it gets so frustrating when you can't change a mind because it's so clear what the answer is, and you've done all the research and you've painstakingly explained to them. I've learned to let go of that as a goal.
Mm.
In my personal relationships as a lawyer, absolutely, I'm going to keep trying to persuade people of the truth. Absolutely, I'm going to keep being an advocate in that sense and using logic and using data and science and rational argument. But in our personal relationships, it's different. If our goal is to maintain and build on a relationship, that's not always going to coexist peacefully with trying to change minds. And so I have to let go of trying to change mind as the ultimate goal.
That's
So that's
great.
where your book really has been helpful.
That's a marvelous insight. And it doesn't mean you have to give it up in all areas of your life. It's like,
Right.
okay, when you're doing your law work, or even probably when you're talking with people who might agree with you, you might be able to do those kinds of things. But I'm really hearing that that's not an approach that you're finding valuable when you're trying to understand or connect with someone.
I mean, there are boundaries. There are certain circumstances I still will not subject myself to. I mean, if I know that the person that I'm about to connect with is so homophobic, they're going to be using really horrible, hateful language.
Mhm.
The relationship probably isn't worth it at that.
Yeah.
So it's not that at any cost I'm willing to build relationships. I mean, there are still limits,
Mhm.
but I think if a person has good intent, um, and they're not a mean person, they're not acting out of hate. They're just coming from a different background and context. I'm willing to meet
Yeah. In my experience, most people are not hateful.
them.
Like most people are well intentioned, but just have a very different idea sometimes about how the world should work.
Mhm. Well, okay, here's an example of when I wasn't successful. If I wasn't even, again, my goal. So Tamir Rice had just been killed in Cleveland, and I was devastated. I mean, he was killed in a park that was around the corner from a house that I had bought in Cleveland, and I was already really feeling the horror of all of these killings of unarmed black men by police across the country. But when it was a boy, when it was a child who was gunned down like that, I was just devastated. I was living in Indiana, and a lot of my neighbors and friends were a lot more conservative than I was. And I had a housemate who I just kind of assumed was liberal because he was out as a gay man. And I just kind of make these assumptions that just aren't right. And he saw how devastated I was about Tamir Rice. And he said, you know what? If those people don't like how they're treated, they should go back to Africa. And I kicked him out of the house. I'm like, I will not be your housemate. I can't live with you if that's how you think. I mean, I didn't even try to connect with him. I'm like, just get out.
Yeah.
I just,
Yeah.
that was a hard limit.
Yeah. Well, and it seems like you know what your boundaries are, and you're making different decisions in different situations. Really assessing, is this worth it to try to maintain this relationship, or is this not? Yeah. Yeah. Um, I just want to ask a couple of things about, because I'm all about skills and strategies. And so it sounds like you're really using some things that have been helpful. So, one thing you were talking about was like just how you deal with emotion when it comes up. So, you're talking about, Fox News makes you cringe, or, if you're in a situation where, you know, just today you said, you recognize that this was going to be really hard for you, and so, how are you dealing with emotions when they come up? It sounds like you're making some different decisions about whether or not to engage or what to do topically. But is there anything else that you do to try to maintain your equilibrium?
I don't know that I've mastered it by any stretch. I'm definitely better than I used to be, and not letting my emotions control me, but it's hard sometimes. Um, like this morning, I was very aware. I was almost like looking at myself, like I am mourning right now. I am depressed. I am upset. But I also knew that if I got out, had lunch with Ken and his father, that I'd be fine. I knew that I could not compartmentalize,
Hmm.
but then what just the act of stepping outside and bringing myself out of this kind of cocoon of darkness, I would be
Hmm.
okay. And I was. And I'm still upset about the opinion, but it doesn't control,
Yeah.
how I am every minute of the day. Um,
So giving it a
Sometimes I don't.
chance,
I'm sorry.
giving it a chance, saying, okay, I'm going to go ahead and not going to avoid this interaction. I'm going to try it within these parameters.
Yeah.
Mhm,
But
mhm.
sometimes I really get so upset that I just, um, it's not like I explode at people, but I have to remove myself. I just have to walk away because if I
Mhm.
don't, then maybe I will. If I feel that somebody just is absolutely disregarding my personal experience, if I share something vulnerable about what it's been like as a bisexual woman or what it's been like, um, as someone who's had an abortion, and then they're just not meeting me there, and instead they're saying something that feels very callous, like disregarding of the value of my life. Sometimes I get really upset and I have to walk away.
Yeah.
Um, I had another experience that I guess it remains to be seen how I'm going to end up with this one. But I was at a gay bar and I was talking to a woman and really connecting with her. This is about a week ago. And we realized we both, wanted to go to Temecula, which is the wine country down here in San Diego. We wanted to go to wineries and go on a hot air balloon ride. That's something we both wanted to do. So do it. And then I mentioned that had a busy schedule because I'm a Padres season member ticket holder. And so, I have a lot of, Friday and Sunday games I'm going to be going to this summer. So I'm not always as free as I normally am. I love baseball. I grew up a Cubs fan. And I grew up a Cubs fan. So we make plans to go to a Cubs Padres game. And this is great. Then she mentions she loves fishing, and I've always wanted to learn how to fish. So next thing I know, we have 3 dates lined up, and just this great connection. And then I said to her, well, not sure what I'm going to wear to the Padres game. I grew up a Cubs fan, but now I'm a Padres fan. So should I wear my Cubs hat and my Padres jersey, or my Padres hat and my Cubs jersey? She said, you can't do either of those. That's too taboo. I said, I like being taboo. She said, no, it's just wrong. And I said, I like being wrong. She said, no, you can't. You have to pick a team. And I started laughing and I said, I can't pick a team. I'm bisexual. And her face, and the whole dynamic changes. And she actually says to me, I said, oh, so now you don't want to date anymore. You don't want to date me anymore. She's like, well, I'll date you, but I'm not going to sex with you. And I said, let's explore that. Why? I want to know what's going on in your head. And that was my response.
Mhm.
And we started talking through it. And I actually did get her to the point where she's like, you know what? She said, I need to think about this more. And we still have a game coming up. But the fact of the matter is, I am polyamorous. I am in a relationship with my primary partner's man. And I said that to her. I said, maybe I could open your mind, but I don't think you should date me because that is probably a lot to ask of you. But we're still going to the baseball game. So who knows how this friendship or whatever it is
Wow.
going to
But
develop.
all
But
and all of that is very generous of you, because people ask me a lot about, well, what happens? Do I have to have a conversation with somebody when it's a topic that is targeting me? And because it sounds like sometimes you've been in conversations where you've been more in an ally or advocate role around the topic, but this is one that was really about you, and you kind of stayed in that, trying to understand and trying
Mhm.
to help to educate somebody. So I imagine that was hard.
It was hard, but I also have had that conversation with so many lesbians over the years. This is not the first time I've had that,
Yeah.
that it was familiar. I knew it was
Mhm.
coming next. And I've been much, much more upset in the past when I have. And I think I don't know if I'm getting thicker skin or it's your book or what, but I'm getting
Yeah.
better at it. Getting
Yeah.
better at it.
That's great. Wow. Thank you for those amazing examples. It's really provides a window into what some of these conversations look like. Is there anything else that you want to share about these experiences or insights that you've gained?
Oh no, not that I can think of really. I just wish more people were trying because it does break my heart how divided we are right now. Um,
Mhm.
and I worry. I'm really worried about this country. I mean, I'm worried. It's just so divisive and it's so painful right now. I miss the way it used to be. I think
Yeah.
it's worse now than ever in my life.
I hear that. People are really suffering this. I have to say, one of the things I appreciate most about having written this book is I feel like I can do something helpful when people are struggling. And so thank you, because you're also helping other people by having this conversation and making it available to folks. So I think you're helping to move people forward, maybe where they might be reluctant.
Thank you for giving us the tools to do it. And I wish more people would read your book so they could have those tools because it really is helpful. It is.
Yeah. Well, I will say, if anybody is watching and they're interested, then you can get my book, Beyond Your Bubble. Take a look at my website, taniaisrael.com. And there's also a place on that website where you can share with me your experiences about connecting with people across the divide. And I would love to hear more about that. So thank you so much, Nancy. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Tanya.